Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beaver Mosh, and today I am joined by Trevor from Abhoria, whose album Depths is coming out on January 19th on Prosthetic Records. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are things going?
Yeah, going well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I was just on vacation. Now I'm back to real life, so it's nice to step into something like this first. It's a little more fun than going right back into real life.
Yeah, where were you at?
We went all over. My wife and I were in Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. It was a
Wow.
trip we'd actually planned to do back in 2020 that, of course, got canceled because of COVID. But we finally got a chance to go out there, and it was beautiful. It was an amazing detachment from reality for a few weeks.
Awesome, awesome. Um, this is your second album under Abhoria coming out following your self-titled that came out in 2022. And I'm curious, Trevor, in any way, what ways do you feel that maybe this is an evolution for your band? For those familiar, is there anything they can expect differently on this record than what they got on the previous record?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like with the first record, my whole kind of like goal behind it was I was trying to write a black metal album that sort of took all the influences I had when I first got into black metal back into the late 90s, right? Emperor and
Yeah,
Immortal and all that kind of stuff. And so while I was proud of it and I think I did a good job with that, I feel like this record is a little bit more its own thing. It's building on Abhoria's last record rather than trying to build on these other albums by other bands. So I feel like, at least in my mind, it's a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more defined, and not quite as obviously influenced maybe by the 90s black metal stuff. So
sure.
it's a bit faster, a bit more melodic, a lot of dissonance on it. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit more cohesive.
Sure, sure. And it sounds to me like there is this thematic tie-in to the record. Like it's almost like you're telling this dystopian tale. And you want to shed some light on that? Maybe some things you want listeners to get ready for, to look for when really diving into the stories you're trying to tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we did a little of that on the first record, but this one I really kind of like went all in with this dystopian world. And so
Yeah.
each song basically, like the way the album's laid out, at the beginning, there's this person who lives in this dystopian world who's basically been locked away in their home, avoiding whatever's been happening outside, and finally has this kind of revelation of like, I can't do this anymore. I can't hide from what's happening. I'm going to go out there. And so this person kind of leaves and goes and explores this world around them. And each song details a different kind of horrible scenario that the person comes across, and just people facing extreme circumstances, trying to survive, doing horrible things to survive. And so hopefully the music somewhat goes with the lyrics in each song and kind of relates to what's actually happening in the story.
Yeah, and from what I read, it sounds like maybe some of them were inspired by true events.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a couple cases, I mean, obviously the ones about uh, cannibalism and stuff, not so much, at least not events
Yeah.
that I've been exposed to. But like The Well, which was our first single, that was inspired by a trip I made out to Arizona. There's a place called Montezuma Well that is a it's a water source that a lot of native indigenous people live near, but it's extremely like highly concentrated with arsenic, so you can't actually drink it.
Hmm.
And so when we were there, I just thought this is an interesting thing. Like if you're out there, trying to find a place to settle and to live, and you find a water source and think like, oh my God, here's what we've been looking for, and ultimately the thing is poisoned. Like, oh, what a horrible just revelation that would be. So that's kind of what inspired the story on that song.
Sure. Yeah. That's great. And you're all you everyone in your band is also involved in other projects.
Right.
Ashen Horde being one example. And I'm wondering what is it about Abhoria that is unique to your musical expression with this project that you weren't able to get in through other metal bands that you're involved with? What is unique for you with Abhoria?
Sure. I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing that kind of led me to doing that, so I've done, oh gosh, four Ashen Horde records and a bunch of EPs. And initially, Ashen Horde, I think, was a little bit more black metal, but over the years, it's really morphed and changed into this kind of prog, death, black, weird
Yeah.
thing. And it's still got some black metal core, but the further I got away from it, which was exactly what I wanted to do with Ashen Horde, the more I kind of longed to do something that was just a bit more purely black metal.
Sure.
Um, And so that was what really drew me to this, is like, can I get back to kind of the what I initially got into when I started writing this kind of music. So that's been the driver behind Abhoria, is just keep it a little bit more focused in the black metal zone. Not 100%, but more so.
Yeah, as someone who listens to a lot of black metal, and I'm very glad that the genre can go in so many directions. There's so many subgenres
Right.
of black metal, and that's great. And I love pretty much all of it. But sometimes I am hungry for just like a straightforward kind of back to that Scandinavian sound black metal. And like when I can get it, I'm really happy for it.
Yeah, that's what's
Yeah.
cool. I hope, well, hopefully this will scratch that itch a little bit eventually. And that's kind of the thing. I'm with you. I like all the different varieties, whether it's atmospheric or this or that, but I definitely tend to gravitate towards the more aggressive
Yeah.
style of black metal. Lots of blast beats, lots of intensity.
Yeah. Now, something I like asking when I do have black metal bands on the show, particularly black metal band, is I think black metal, when compared to other subgenres of metal, it's one that can be misunderstood, in my opinion. So I'm wondering, what is the draw for black metal for you personally?
It's a great question. I mean, for me, it's always been about the music. I've never really cared that much about like the lyrics, even back in the
Mm,
day when I first got into it. I mean, certainly when I was in high school, it was kind of cool to listen to this shocking stuff about Satan and whatever, but
yeah.
I just like the musical piece of it, not just the aggression, but it's the aggression mixed with melody. So I initially had gotten into death metal. That was kind of my first taste of like the extreme world and some grindcore, which is still cool and I loved it all. But when I first heard black metal, it's like, oh, it's all that intensity and aggression, but it's got this melodic core. And I love the
Mhm.
dissonant chords and things that they use, and some of the symphonic elements. That death metal was more about just that gut level, like, oh, head bang your head. Um, so yeah, that's what kind of has always appealed to me about it, more so than like the philosophical elements, I suppose.
Sure. And yes, and there's nothing wrong with death metal doing the very much kind of straightforward bang your head
Right.
stuff. I love
It's
that, and
awesome.
I want some of
Yes,
that.
when I
But
want it, that is what I want, and that's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But you're right. I think part of me, like, I think where I really enjoy black metal is that it can like it finds a way to blend this aggression and this intensity and this brutality with almost sort of an introspection. Like there is the
Yes, absolutely.
atmosphere and it's kind of more like an internal feel, and that's always been very captivating to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's not just blood and guts and all
Yeah.
that stuff, which there's a place for, but no, that's a great point. And I think that's kind of too, like I said, lyrically, I don't go right into the any of the religious stuff, but it's an interesting way to kind of examine like how people deal with these really brutal situations. So yeah, it's just a different look at things rather than just like, oh, it's torture and pain and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're working with a new vocalist on this record. Does that tend to be a hard switch for a band moving from one vocalist to another? I mean, I
For
know
sure.
bands switch members all the time, but I feel like vocalists is a specific thing.
Yeah, it is. It was, but we were so fortunate that Ben Pitts, who's our new vocalist, came in, and it was interesting because the album we were kind of in a pinch. We'd done all the other parts, and when things didn't work out with Wally, it was this mad scramble. I had to write, all the lyrics in about 2 weeks' time because we had studio time
Damn.
booked. But Ben just came in and nailed it. Like it was, I don't know. I give him full credit for whatever magic he did to make it happen.
Hmm.
He just pulled it out, and it was exactly what I wanted it to be. So it was, yes, like you said, a tough switch, but all the best to Wally. But yeah, I feel like Ben is a perfect fit for the band, and he gets exactly what we're trying to do, and just totally nailed it.
Yeah, and I'm curious about the backstory there because I know you're based in LA. Was Ben a fellow LA metal musician?
No, unfortunately, Ben was more closely tied to all the other guys who are in Denver,
Oh
which
wow.
I know it's this funny thing. I guess I've got a bigger network there, but so he was referred there. So yes, no, they're all together in Denver. Like everyone else in the band lives there. I live here.
Okay.
Not necessarily the perfect situation, but we're making it work.
So your Metal Archives page is a little misleading there.
Oh, I'll have to check that. I don't have to see what it says.
Yeah, yeah. uh so this was mixed by Zach Oren, which who
Yes.
has a very impressive resume, has worked with a number of bands, including like Suffocation. And
Oh yeah.
I'm wondering, what was your experience working with him? What do you think it brought to the sound?
Yeah, it was awesome. And it's funny because I was kind of didn't know who I wanted to work with for this one. So I hit up Steve at Prosthetic and was like, hey, any recommendations? He's like, yep, Zach Owen, done. That's who you got to
Damn.
work with. So I was like, all right. So I hit him up and yeah, no, I think he really did a great job. I mean, I was happy with the first one, but I feel like this is just next level in terms of just you can really the guitars cut through. That's something I think is lost in a lot of modern metal is the drums overpower the guitars. So I
Yeah.
like everything to be heard kind of equally as much as possible. And I feel like he did that. So yeah, I'm really happy with how the record turned out.
Cool, cool. And you mentioned, Prosthetic Records, and that's a great segue because I wanted to ask because you're returning the Prosthetic. Your first record was also on Prosthetic. It's a big, recognizable name in underground metal, and I'm wondering what has the Prosthetic experience been for you?
No, it's been great. They've been super supportive. It's kind of funny because we came on at a weird time. It was during COVID. We signed during, I want to say 2021. So there were like, lots of delays with the record because of that. Not delays, but it just took a while to get it out, I guess.
Yeah,
And then getting together to do shows was not really a thing. So it feels like the whole process for the first album was like this giant drawn out thing, but they were super cool about that. Now we're getting to the second album cycle where played some shows earlier this year. We're doing a tour in March. Um, and yeah, they've been supportive. I mean, it's one of these things you just hope it gets to the right ears, and I'm sure they're hoping that as
hmm.
well. Um, but yeah, they've been great.
Well, I'm curious, when you say right ears, do you have in your mind who the right ears are? Like, who is the intended audience for this record?
It's a fantastic question, and I often ask myself that too. I mean, the right ears are the people that think it's an incredible record, and people that hate it don't need to listen to it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's such the metal community is so big, and there's so much stuff out there that it's just hard to get to people because right, just the sheer volume. I've got
Yeah.
friends who will troll Bandcamp day in and day out and find all these new things. I just don't have the patience or the time for it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like anyone that's into the more aggressive side of black metal, Marduk and Dark Funeral and Immortal, that kind of thing, but with a melodic bend, and maybe don't want the sketchy or questionable politics because there's none of that involved either.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we're like actively trying to be this like non-political band, but that is a piece of it too. Like you can listen to it and not feel guilty.
Yeah, no, well, if you brought it up, we could talk about that. Why do you think that's been a part of black metal's past, and why do you think we are moving past it? Some of those,
I
just
don't
like,
know, and it continually comes up, and
yeah,
it's funny over the years, even with Ashen Horde, I've been hit up by labels, and I look into them like, why are you reaching out to me? This is like totally not my scene. This kind of
yeah,
the NSBM thing. I don't know. It's something about the extreme nature of it, I guess, that draws people to just all extremes. But in my mind, metal and black metal in particular has always been like rebelling against the norm. And
hmm,
so I don't know. To me, it feels like if you're going down that road, the NSBM thing, it's like the opposite. You're actually going to this like kind of groupthink, racist thing, whatever. Like it feels like it should be the opposite of that. Like everyone's invited. We don't want to be part of this like weird exclusive thing. But I don't know. I'm probably rambling there. But I've never understood why it's been
no,
super.
no, no, and we don't have to stay on this topic for too much longer because I know that's not why you came on the show. But
Yeah.
I did make that exact point with one of the last bands I talked to, Bullet Apes, Bullet Bronze, to another black metal band, and we kind of got into this kind of the same topic, and what I said to them is like a lot of these NSBM bands, they'll get really into the like anti-Judeo-Christian lyrics
Right.
and all that image, and that's cool and dandy. But it's almost a contradiction because in their political ideas, their views on marginalized groups will almost mirror that of like the religious
Right.
institutions that they claim to
Absolutely.
oppose, and it just really doesn't make any sense.
Yep. That's exactly spot on. That's what I've kind of always laughed a little bit. And I don't
Yeah,
want to oust anyone or ostracize participants, but I've seen that even with some of the anti-Christian stuff, it becomes the same. You're pushing as
yeah,
much anti-Christian propaganda as the Christians that you're mad at. So it's like Is that really any better, or is it just different?
It's just different. It's just you're just putting a different face on it. You're putting
Right.
corpse paint on
Exactly. Right.
it. Well, we're in the beginning of 2024, so we're like we as metal listeners, we just got through the kind of 2023 end of year hype, people making their end of year list and kind of getting hype around that. Some bands choose to put out records kind of closer to that for that exposure.
Right.
You're doing the opposite. You're putting it like right at the beginning of 2024. Was that a strategic decision?
If it was, I don't know, but this is, I mean, it's kind of up to Prosthetic at this point. They've got their
Yeah.
roster for the year and they decide when things are coming out. Um, I do know that part of the reason to not put it out toward the back half is just because of what you said, the competition.
Yeah.
So many bigger bands and established acts are putting things out, so it's really easy to get lost in the mix. So I think that's part of it is like, let's come out right after that so they'll stand
Yeah.
out a little bit more. Because I mean, obviously we're competing with Taylor Swift and everything else. Those are our main. That's like our main competition. So
Yeah,
gotta be
yeah,
careful.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure all the bands that I'm listening to are, Ticketmaster has to make a tough decision. Do we book Taylor Swift or do we book this death metal band? I don't
Exactly
know.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I think that's a very good point because even like me, like a quote unquote metal journalist, I put that in air quote because I make a YouTube channel, but it's kind of like my job to listen to as many metal records as I possibly can throughout a year. And I know I probably only got through 20% of what came out,
Oh, for
but
sure. Right.
this kind of period between the middle of December and the middle of January, things quiet down.
Hmm.
And so when bands like you put out a record, there's not much else for me to go and try to listen to. So like it's like easier for me to like go and okay, spend a lot of time with like the record that came out in January because there's not much else out that's
Right.
new.
Yeah, we force you into the corner. Like, no, you will listen to our record because there's nothing else out here.
Yeah. Smart.
Hey, if it
Yeah.
works, it works.
Well, so I was going to ask because I was going to wonder like what does Abhoria have in store for 2024? I was going to ask is their tour dates, but you kind of already answered that question. It sounds like you are. Is it kind of is it a US tour or are you just supporting half the country or kind of what's going on with that?
Yeah, we're finally hitting the road properly. So we did a couple shows this summer out in the Denver area, not surprisingly. That's where everyone lives.
Yeah.
But this time we're going to do a nice kind of West Coast run, middle last slash west. So we're going to start in like Salt Lake City and then hit up Missoula, Portland, Seattle, and then kind of down the California coast. So it should be good. We've got a lot of cool other bands lined up, and yeah, it'll be nice to actually get out there and properly tour this record.
I off the top of my head, I don't think I'm that like familiar with that part of the US in terms of its scene, like the Denver, Salt Lake City. I mean, I know I've listened to bands from those cities, but is it like a pretty is the scene pretty good out there? Are there a lot of metal fans?
Denver, yes, for sure, has an
Yeah.
epic scene. Like, I mean, obviously my entire network is apparently there, but yeah, there's a lot of cool bands and people into it there. Salt Lake, I think it's a little bit more spread out, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of cool bands and a lot of fans. So I think it's kind of good in that it brings them all to every show, right? There's just
Yeah.
not quite as much competition out there, so we got to feed the beast. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure, and then we're working on a show in Missoula, Montana too, and I have no idea what to expect up there. It could be every metal person in all of Montana, or it could
Yeah.
be no one. I don't really know.
So I've reviewed, you know, hundreds of records on this channel so far. I've come across, and I've only come across one album from Montana since I've
Ah,
started this. Like, it is not a. I know that is not a hot spot, but perhaps you'll go there and the people are like, yes, a metal show, and then we'll want to go to it. So
right,
the metal fans, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. We're talking to a promoter there now about what's going on. So I don't know. We may end up on a very mixed bill, a variety of metal styles. I don't. My guess is, from what I've found, there's not like a huge black metal scene up there. So maybe
yeah,
this will be something interesting for
yeah,
us.
yeah. It'll be something different for the fans. Well, I know Are you going to be splitting time with this band and Ashen Horde? Do you have anything kind of planned with that, or is this kind of your focus for now?
For now, this is the focus. There's always stuff going on with Ashen Horde. Ashen Horde is a little bit unique though in that everyone lives completely in different places, not
Sure.
just different states. I mean, Robin lives in our drummer's in Australia, so Ashen Horde has never been in the same room at the same time. But we are working on. We're about 80% done with the new record. So a lot going on there. But yeah, that's one of those where I'd love to play live someday, but I basically have to recruit an entirely new band to make that happen. So as far as like yeah, live playing goes, it's going to be all about Abhoria, but in the
Yeah.
studio, a lot of stuff going on.
Now, you as a metal musician, obviously, I'm assuming you are also a huge metal fan, just like in your own time. And do you have any show that you are looking forward to that you have on the calendar that you are attending?
Great. The only one I have that I'm super psyched for right now is Voivod. I've
Oh,
not
hell yeah.
ever seen them, and they're coming through pretty soon. Trying to think if there's anything else. Like, it's kind of funny. I don't have a lot of stuff on the calendar yet for this year, but I probably should get cracking and seeing what's coming through. But that's the one that stands out. I'm psyched to go see Voivod.
Yeah, I didn't know Voivod was touring. I should check on that. Maybe they're coming to Minneapolis. So I would love to see Voivod. That's
Yeah.
a incredible band.
Yes.
For me, I haven't like looked like a lot through the like intentionally through like a lot of the shows happening, but I know there's a lot of legacy acts touring this year. So I'm seeing some of the big names. Like I'm seeing Iron Maiden, I'm seeing
Oh
Metallica,
yeah.
I'm seeing Blind Guardian. So stacked year for like those kind of shows for me. So kind of for
I
that kind of
love
stuff.
it, and I love that because
Yeah.
like for me, some of the stuff I've been able to see recent years has been sort of like Halloween with Michael Kiska,
Sure.
things like that coming. I love it because it's like stuff I would never thought I'd ever get to see, and they're still out doing their thing. I love that these bands are
Mhm.
still going. Um, like who did I see last year that was so great? God, my brain's a bit mushy right now, but yeah, I just love that all these bands are still out there doing their thing. God, we saw my wife and I went and saw a Steve Miller band the other day, and the guy's 80, and he's still
Yeah.
killer. And I just love the fact that at 80, he's still just out there playing. Like that's cool. So I love
Yeah.
that. I think there was always a perception that metal was going to be kind of a come and go. No one in their 60s and 70s would still be doing it, and yet they are. And I think it's awesome.
Well, according to like some of the bigger, you know, rock journalists, music journalists, metal did die, but like it just moved underground and
Yeah,
maybe for the better,
exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was never meant for total mainstream. Maybe glam was, but nothing else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Halloween and I kind of perked up when you mentioned that because I don't know, I just get this perception from when like will work like, like various metal Reddits or metal forums that like there's a power metal fan base and there's a black metal fan base, and those two branches of metal don't overlap. But that's not true. I don't think that's true. I like both of those things.
I've wondered about that. I feel like in the
Yeah.
US, maybe, and maybe I'm generalizing, it's like that. But you see some of these festivals in Europe where they have like the most bizarre mix of bands. It'll be like The Offspring and Halloween and Megadeth and Cannibal Corpse, and everyone's just there enjoying all of it. And I'm like, that's kind of cool, but I feel like there is a bit more of a siloed fan base here. My guess is people like multiple things, but they don't want to admit it for fear of being judged not as cool. But I just don't care anymore. Like I love all of it. I love power metal. I love black metal, death metal. I love Brit rock and pop and punk and a variety of things. So it's like if you like music, you should just embrace it.
I don't listen to power metal because I think it's cool. In fact, I listen to it because I think it's not cool. I like how
There
nerdy
you
it
go.
is.
Right, the cheese factor is high with power metal, I will admit, but it
Yeah.
also gets me.
I've actually thought about making content about this, but I've always thought that like as metal subgenres have evolved, they're the various metal subgenres all kind of pick an element of some of the more original bands as Sabbath or Priest to kind of emphasize.
Right.
And where I think black metal kind of leaned into maybe that atmosphere and the evil nature that some of those earlier bands did, like Sabbath definitely. I think power metal decided let's really emphasize the fantastical elements, like the
Yes.
the the lore and the legend that I think has always been part of metal, and
The
that's
big
cool. And
swing your
like,
beaner chorus. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I love that. I love both aspects. I would think there's room for both. I think they can kind of like work together. I don't think, well, sometimes they do. Sometimes there are black metal bands that do sing about Dungeons and Dragons and vice versa. But, you
It
know,
happens. Yeah, and it's funny.
yeah.
I feel like there have been some bands who have kind of successfully blended the sides. I mean, I think Equilibrium from Germany, minus the last two records that I didn't really love, I thought they did. It was kind of pretty close to a black metal, power metal blend. Insephirum have done that to a degree. I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. It's like you can do it, but that's another thing that's kind of funny. I guess I've seen over the years as someone who typically writes music like in a variety of genres. I'm not really genre specific most of the time. People seem to really like genre purity in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's kind
so
of like
weird.
I want power metal or black metal. I don't want a little of each. And I'm the opposite. I want like mix it all together. Make me this bizarre
Hmm.
stew of things. But so yeah.
I mean, I think about like the success that the band Worm has had over the past few years, and they are a band that you can't really put into a genre. I mean, they're some songs sound like a doom track, and some tracks are pure black metal, and sometimes they'll be a death metal band,
Right.
and people love that about them. I love that about them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's, I love the yeah. That I think I'm again right. It gets back to the kind of the metal, the freedom of playing metal. It's like we
Mhm.
shouldn't have the walls around us. Like it's not.
No.
Yeah, you should be able to just kind of put whatever is cool in there.
Now, for the entirety of this interview, I've kind of been like eyeballing what's behind you. As a record collector, are those CDs?
Yes. So I
So,
am of the collector. I also have vinyl. I have a shitload of
yeah.
vinyl, but I am a mad CD collector, and yes, that has
So
been like I'm a huge addiction.
so I'm always curious because as a collector, um I like vinyl and I like cassettes, and I've never understood personally the appeal of CDs. But there are people that really are about CDs, and I respect it. I'm curious, like what about CDs really works for you?
Funny, I don't honestly know if I've ever thought about that. I mean, I suppose part of it is that's what I started buying. So in the
Sure.
late '90s, when started buying my own music, that was what was popular and that was what was out there. I started buying, but obviously I bought tapes when I was a kid, um, and then we had vinyl around the house, but vinyl wasn't very popular at that point. So yeah, I
Hmm.
guess that's it. And for whatever reason, that's it. That's what hits me. It's like I got to get everything on CD. Though these days, I buy all three because that's just who I am. So if
Sure.
something comes out, I buy the vinyl, the tape, and the CD version of everything. And then of course, I immediately put the CD on my iPhone so that I can listen to it when I'm out and about. So, for four versions of everything.
And you can get you can buy all three on Bandcamp and you get three versions of it digitally. So it's you
Oh,
get so
right,
much.
exactly. Yeah. And I know it's kind of ridiculous, but it's like whatever. This is what makes me happy, so whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure bands really appreciate that you do that. Are you putting depths out on all three formats? Four, I
Yeah,
guess.
Prosthetics just putting it on a vinyl, but we are doing a small CD run for the tour. We'll have those too.
Cool, 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 cool. And so we you've answered this already. So but you mentioned tour again. So you are hitting kind of that kind of middle west, not the Midwest, but like the middle west US. Do you plan like in the future to kind of extend more towards the Midwest, like your Chicago's and your East Coast cities?
Oh yeah, for sure. This
Yeah.
one made sense just because it kind of tracks like the Denver to LA strip, right? And then
Yeah.
Ben, our new vocalist Ben, he's got a lot of connections in Portland, so it kind of mapped out that where we had places to go. But yes, after this, I'd love to. And I lived in New York for many years, so I'd love to do the East Coast, get back
Sure.
out there, that kind of thing. And I've got family in Texas, so yeah, ultimately would like to do more. And you said you're in Minneapolis, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a good buddy of mine, Jordan. He plays bass in a band called Weaponizers from Minneapolis. So we took many road trips back then. Back in the day, we hit that, and then we go to Milwaukee Metal Fest back in the late '90s.
Yeah, yeah. People think of this part of the states as kind of like the flyover part of the country, but there's a lot of great metal here. Bands stop skipping Minneapolis. You have a lot of fans here.
That's right. Good. Yeah. No, I'd love to get back up there again. It's been a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, yeah.
Not in the
um,
winter though. No offense,
Yeah,
but
no. I don't know why I continue to choose actively to live here when it gets as cold as it does, but I did. I did, you know. Um, I guess the trade-off is I don't experience as much extreme heat, which is sometimes more bothersome to me, but the
yeah,
winters are cold.
yeah, that's exactly. I was like when we first time I
Yeah.
came and I saw that like all the buildings downtown have like, little things connecting them to each other, so you don't have to ever go outside. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is a bad sign.
Well, that's only downtown for like the business people. Like the working class people of Minneapolis do not get those little connecting
Right.
things.
You face
Yeah,
the weather.
yeah. Well, I was hoping we could just kind of talk about black metal since
Sure.
that's what you
Let's
do,
do it.
and I'm curious. You mentioned like the Emperor, the Immortals, but are there some kind of more like I don't want to use the term B-list band. Like I don't want to rank them
Yeah.
like that, but like like kind of like the lesser known, not bands that don't make your like rate your music top 5 bands to get into black metal sort of list.
Totally.
Like, are there some records there that you would want to recommend to my viewers? They're like these were super influential to you.
It's a great question. Yeah. So now I'm like on my right hand side is like black and death metal stuff. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
glancing around. Um, here's a funny connection to Minneapolis too. A guy named Paul. He's in I don't even know if they're active anymore. A band called Terrorism, which are from Minneapolis, and he they came out to play in Brooklyn and they stayed at my place, and he got me turned on to Cold, Khold. They were on Moonfog back in the day, but
Okay.
they're one that really hit me hard. He got me into them, and it was kind of like this, they're like almost raw black and roll, but not quite, just real grim with really good production. But Cold
Yeah.
have been a favorite of mine, and then that's I kind of got into Chulis, which is the same guys. I like that kind of grim black and roll thing. Let's see what else. God, going deep into the deep well. I don't know.
I love Deep Wells.
I know, right? Well, okay, so I'm trying to think like Foscor. They're a band from Barcelona. Their newer records are they've switched over to like a clean vocal thing, but some of their early stuff is really, really cool. The Smile of the Sad Ones is a great record. Um, what else? Let's see. Let's peruse the shelves here. This is the most exciting thing. Everyone watches me stare at a wall on the screen.
I assume that a lot of people that watch my show are also do what you're doing all the time. They're
All
just
the
like
time.
looking at their records, trying to pick stuff out. I mean, I do that. I just see you doing what I do all the time. So like I love it.
Right. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, what? Oh, yeah, what else do I like? I
yeah.
mean, some of the others I really love. So, like I told you, I kind of gravitate toward the weird and the blends. Solifald, I love that, their early stuff, um, because it was like so eclectic. And I mean, I know they're definitely more on the close probably to the top five, but like the Borknagar and Vinterzorg, things like that.
Sure, yeah.
Taurus, of course, because they just what I think is fascinating about black metal, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but is a lot of those bands' early records sounded very similar. Like, right, if you listen to their early EPs and demos, Emperor Satyricon, they all had a very similar sound, but they all went in completely different directions over the years. And I think that's just what's really cool about it.
Yeah.
And then, post like Isan solo work stuff and we're enslaved are doing now and all that. It's like even more different. And I just kind of love that. And Don Heimsgard are a good example too.
Oh
Like they
yeah.
just kept going further and further from the core, but
Yeah.
it's cool. It's like it for whatever reason that genre really fed the like do what you want to do and then do something completely different.
Yeah, well, I mean it was almost like it was almost like when black metal started, it was like we see what's turning in the metal and we don't like it, so let's strip it down and be completely at its core. And then we
Mhm.
can rebuild from that. And I think that's always been kind of like the proper ethos of black metal. Let's cut it down, let's be super raw, but then let's see what we can do now that we've like rid all the fat. Let's add a
Right.
different type of fat on top of it.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, when I think of like Norwegian band and you think of like Enslaved and then you think of Dark Throne, they went in two completely
Completely
different
different.
directions.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to even, yeah, if you were just to listen to them side by side, you'd be like, there's no way these came from the same kind of basic blueprint.
No, I mean, in a lot of ways, they both kind of abandoned metal and then kind of brought it back in. Enslaved went more into almost like prog rock direction,
Yeah.
where Fender was like, I like punk now. Did you know
Right.
Fenrez also is like a house DJ on at some point?
I keep seeing things about him DJing, but I didn't know that's what it was. I just assumed he was playing black metal, so he's doing like actual house music.
Yeah, I learned this recently. I was on a just a I think it was like the quietest, like a different, like just kind of a general all-purpose music blog, and it was something about like Fenrez, but it was his like recommendations for like obscure house 7 inches that he like collects and puts into his set, which is fascinating. I
I
don't, I
would
would,
not
I
have
you,
guessed.
I think that's something that I feel like metal nerds would like bring up more often because that's such an interesting piece of trivia. But the other interesting piece of trivia is that like I think he has a part-time job as like a postal delivery
That
person.
part, he does work. I've heard that he works in them. And it's
Yeah.
funny you mentioned Fenris because something I find fascinating about him is, so I'm also a big rock fan, but Hanoi Rocks. I love Hanoi Rocks,
Hmm.
and he has a Hanoi Rocks tattoo, and it's like the most unlikely thing for Fenris to have. And I remember when I learned that, I was like, oh wow, okay,
Such an interesting character. I'm working on ideas like that. I could just do like a deep dive of Fenris weird
right,
trivia. But yeah, such an interesting person, and like you could tell, like if you go back to like some of the early like black metal documentaries and books, he was always of kind of that crowd, but also always not in that crowd. Kind of always was doing his own thing, became his own kind of cult of personality. We all
yep.
love him for it.
Yeah, and I think like part of it's like I don't think he ever really took himself that seriously. I feel
No.
like so many of those black metal dudes back in the day did. It was too much. They were too into I don't think he ever really did that. And I know Danny Filth's kind of a funny character to bring into a black metal conversation, but he's the same. He never really took himself that seriously, and I think that kind of differentiated him from all the other guys that did.
Well, and I'm not gonna say like not to kind of I guess shit on Euronymous' influence because it's definitely there,
Yeah.
but he definitely took himself very seriously, and because of that, he's easier to kind of make fun of. Like looking
Right.
back, where like Fenrez was just kind of in on the joke from the beginning.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they kind of become self-parodies at some point.
Yeah, huh. That's kind of interesting to think about it. I did not expect this conversation to kind of go in towards like old black metal, figureheads and kind of dissecting their
Right.
personalities. But
Well, it's also been funny over the years. So, right, when I got into it back at that period, I remember, I think it was Rolling Stone did a whole feature on black metal, and they were talking about Mayhem and all these guys and all the crazy stuff. And it was like so weird. Like, oh my God, this is like, you had bands before like Kiss and everything that, of course, freaked out parents for whatever reason, but like they had an image that the music and the lifestyle didn't reflect at all. They were just dressing up. Then suddenly there were these bands that were like living the life that they were singing about and all that. And it was like, wow, this is scary. And it was very intimidating and also alluring. But
mm,
having now followed them and with the advent of social media and everything and getting insight into their lives, you're like, it was all just an image. Like they
oh
probably
yeah,
took themselves pretty seriously back then, but now you've got uh, Isan and Satir and Shagroth and stuff painted like posting pictures of their kids' birthday parties and all this thing, and it's like, wow, okay, this is a very different view that I would have never expected back then.
well, and also I think a huge part of kind of the conversation is that like those. That Norwegian scene, those they were kids. I mean, they
They
were
were kids,
very
yes.
young, and they were just kind of trying to be edgy kids, and
Yep.
things happened.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. They grew up. I mean, at some point they did, and I'm sure plenty of them regret things they did, as we all do. But you know, the lucky few that didn't do things that were actually felonies. or
Yeah.
better for it these days.
I mean, you bring up Isan, and I've read some of like his perspectives on kind of being part of like that second wave black metal movement and his views on Satanism. Like he always thought that like the kind of showy kind of just kind of edgelord type of Satanism, which I kind of like, not gonna lie, it's cool, but
Right,
that he thought it was kind of underdeveloped and maybe immature. And Isan was like, I'm gonna take more of this like very philosophical and
right,
inward view on like Satanism and like anti-Christianity. And it was like very academic. And
right.
I can't like paraphrase it because like I'm not gonna pretend like I tried to like understand it, but it was very interesting to like kind of see that, oh, Isan is smarter than a lot of these guys, and he's not just like not just the glasses, like
Right, right,
yeah,
right. No,
yeah.
but it's true, and it is like right. I mean, I think that's just it shows the age, and he was
Mm,
I guess a little more advanced because that is kind of the rebellion thing, right? When you're a
yeah,
teenager and stuff, it's just very basic. It's like, oh, I hate this, so I'm gonna burn the cross thing, and it's
yeah.
like, all right. But he took it to a more of a like, yeah, why? Why don't we actually like this? What are the elements of it that don't make sense, and why is this a
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, it's
thing?
fascinating people in a wild subculture that
Yes,
we are both for some reason drawn to.
right.
Um, I I guess metal in general, and not just black metal, but metal in general. There is part of the appeal of it being kind of this misunderstood, sort of mysterious, sort of institutions that try to control me
Yep.
can't tap into it, and that is part of the appeal, and I get that, but also I don't know. There is maybe a level of artistry that you don't pick up on with metal if you just focus on those elements. Like I think there's a lot that can be expressed through aggression and
Oh yeah.
dark sounds and just speed and intensity. There's so many different emotions and images that brings up that can be expressed through this genre of music.
Yeah, and I feel like it's something you almost have to build up. I don't want to say a tolerance for, but you kind of build up to it, right? Because on the surface, that is what it is. It's just
Mm,
loud and aggressive and fast and blah. But if you take the time to get in there, you'll see there's a lot more going on because I think that's what a lot of people hear. They're just like, oh, it just sounds like noise and it's just screaming and it's this. But take the time to really kind of let it grow on you and figure out what's going on. Um, Most people just aren't willing to do so. Maybe that is what makes it cool. It's like if you get it, you are in an exclusive club. You have
yeah.
taken the time to figure this out.
Well, too, it's like I'm someone, and I don't mean to make this sound like elitist at all. I'm just it's I I think a lot of people, listen to music as a background thing or they put on a playlist, and
Yes,
I'm not gonna decry that. If music, if like music, listen to music super intentionally is not something you're interested in, that's I'm not gonna force it on you.
sure,
But if you don't want to listen to music that way, then I don't think metal in any way can kind of break the barriers for you, right? Like you're not gonna get it listening to music that way. It's a music where you have to kind of sit down and put on headphones to really kind of pick up on the new ones. I think especially with black metal, those like melodic overtones you talk about um, are not going to reveal themselves to you unless you are like trying to find them.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that's part of the appeal too. Like it sucks you in. It requires you to kind of lean in, but then it rewards you for doing that.
yep, yep. It totally does. And there's nothing against pop music, whatever. It's
Yeah,
fine. It's something that I like, but I do feel like it's kind of like fast food versus like a gourmet meal where, yeah, if you just
yeah.
want something quick, it's got a beat, it gets your head moving and kind of whatever, and then versus you really want to examine the flavors and like it's not just something thrown on a bun of salt.
Now, I think once you get into like the know and you understand it, I think there are parts of Black Mirror that can be catchy. There are immortal riffs that I listen to like that. That's fun. I think that's really
Absolutely.
fun.
They get
Yeah,
just as stuck in your head as any pop song. I agree.
yeah. Ah, well, Trevor, I don't think I have any pressing questions on my end, but I don't like ending any interviews without letting you have the floor for any final thoughts or anything I might have missed, and just to give you opportunities to plug whatever you need to plug.
Sure, sure. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I mean, the plug is the new record. It's out on the 19th, which is what, 11 days from now.
yeah, it is. We are
Really
recording this on
excited
the
about
8th.
this one. It's funny because the first record was like from conception to release was like 5 or 6 years because of a variety of different things. This one
Yeah,
feels much more fresh. Like when that came out, even at that point, I felt kind of old. So I'm like, I'm really excited about this record because the songs still feel kind of new to me.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I hope people dig it. It's got a really cool cover by Dan Seagrave, who I was, such a fan of
yeah.
growing up. It was really exciting to work with him. I think the songs are cool. I think the performances are great. Ben did a killer job on the vocals. Everyone did great, and that's it. And hopefully people come out and see us in March, and we'll have a blast taking this thing
Hell
on the road.
yeah. Well, everyone watching at home, uh, keep an eye out for the new Abhoria record, Depths, coming off of Prosthetic Records on January 19th in about 11 days. Um, yeah, thanks for watching. My name is Maddie, aka Beavermosh, and I'm signing off.